It's been 20 years. I was here in 2000. And there's just, the country's a different country than I was here 22 years ago.
Yeah, how so? What have you noticed specifically?
I think the biggest change is the infrastructure, right? Well, we're driving down these roads and there's highways. I remember being in Surat, which was my mom's hometown, and they were just starting to put in highways at that point, and I thought it was just so interesting to see that happening. But here we are 22 years later, and the amount of highways that stream and continue, you can see the building continuing throughout this country. I mean, over the next 20 years, it's going to be enormous change.
I can only imagine. Yeah, that was one of the things that gripped me as well, as we were coming up sort of the foothills. You know, right now we're in Shimla, which is the mother of all hill towns. But on the way, we came to these lesser towns, and they were very localized, very small, and yet you'd see the infrastructure, the columns going up, which foreshadowed the mega highway coming through, which would reduce the time to get from Delhi, Shimla, say, Delhi, say, to Shimla. And it had to make me wonder, you know, in another 2 decades, what would it be like? Would these people be living still under the shadow of this great highway? Would they have more suburban-style jobs in tune with the more developed Western world, where they work in one location and they live often out many miles away? Who's to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see kind of what happened in the U.S., right? If you walk around India today, there are so many mom and pop businesses, and I don't think that's going to change. I think that's going to ingrained in you know, their capitalism that exists here.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, more
Cool.
high-end, you know, national or international chains will move in and kind of eat up some of that volume. I mean, we were just noticing today how the stores that had people in them that had customers shopping there tended to be the shops that had international brand recognition, right? So you're already starting to see that happen, and I think over the next few years, for good or for bad, there will be probably less just family-owned businesses, just like we have in the U.S. at this point, right?
जी हाँ, सच बात है. और आप, on a personal level, did you find things in your interactions with people that maybe you wouldn't have encountered 22 years ago?
Well, I'd say the way women dress has progressed tremendously over the last 22 years. I mean, the amount of women wearing, you know, tighter clothing, form-fitting clothing, that was an anomaly 20 years ago, 22 years ago. Today, it's the norm, which is nice, obviously, to see. They still have a ways to go on having, you know, addressing women, right? I mean, you've noticed it on this trip that they talk to you, they don't talk to me.
They address the man primarily.
Yeah, they definitely address the man. You know, and then I wonder if I was alone, if it would be different. Probably, obviously, they could only address me. But also, I don't know if there's some uncomfortable cultural stigma for a man to talk to another man's wife, you know, for fear of, you know, upsetting him. So, again, I don't know that they're necessarily discounting me. I think it may be just a cultural
phenomenon,
form of respect.
Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting was that our driver was talking about how within the confines of Indian society, women stay home and they work, they worry about the kids and such, and domestic responsibilities. And my comment to him was that this was true in the United States as well, up until the 1970s, when women started to work, and then all of a sudden the economy shifted to one in which you needed two incomes, in order to fully live the middle class lifestyle. Otherwise, it would pass you by with one income. And, you know, I think that perhaps this is a hidden trap that has not been unfolded yet. But we shall see, right? I mean, you know, there's definitely a desire for modernization here, which is interesting in the United States because there seems to be this sort of subsection of the community that looks to turn back the hands of time to an imagined golden age when things like women staying at home and the hegemony of the male were in full force, you know?
Well, yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think he's working towards a middle class lifestyle.
He being Modi ji?
No, the driver, our
Ah,
driver, really, right? He's trying to educate his children.
Yeah.
He's working to make sure the next
Bilkul,
generation
yes.
goes into the middle class zone,
Mhm.
right? So I think yes, it's going to happen. I am not opposed to it. I think it will change women's stature in this country. It's
And you
already
can see
happening
it. I mean,
at
the female
higher.
police force. It was funny when I approached that woman at Scandal
Yeah.
Point today. You know, this female police officer. I think Madam G, and she smiled a bit. You know, as if like it was just a struggle. Her stone face seemed to melt into this more like congenial, sure, absolutely, sort of body language. And I think part of that is because you can imagine the struggle that these, you know, larkies have had to go through to rise to the stature they have, and they're not about to give it up for a cutesy smile or something like that, you know?
No, and I think in the upper classes, it's already happened, and it will trickle down to
Mhm.
you know the you know as you get you know to the higher income families, they're educating their daughters. Their daughters are expected to have strong careers before they get married. So the
Yeah.
expectation at that level is already changed, and I think it'll just trickle down through the
Yes,
society.
absolutely, absolutely. One thing I noticed too was that the advertisements to college on the way up, Dilly say, were geared towards women. You know what I mean? As if the young college women were primarily female.
Yeah.
A changing place.
Well, trying to get the
Honey.
boys are already going to college, right? So they need a new population. That's a good point. I didn't even pick up on that. That's
yeah,
true.
everyone was a
Every-
young woman
every
with
was
a,
a young
stack
woman.
of books under her arms
Yeah.
or some
That's
such
interesting.
thing.
So it's a population they're not capturing today, right? So
yeah.
they need to add that to to fulfill their enrollment. What worries me, and I saw this with some of my family, is there's a huge debt that families take on for this college education, and something we struggle with in the U.S. as well,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. 9% per year it goes up.
And even more struggle here
Mhm.
because there is no financial aid. It's 100% on the family to pay for that education, or on the child. There's not even loans, so it really does fall on the parents. And with a population of 1.3 billion
Probably
at this point,
yeah.
are there enough of those kind of jobs to justify the expense that these parents are putting? Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't educate children.
Mhm.
I just worry about the financial implications. That will
For-
this investment pay off for every child?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I worry, that parents will get into debt that they can't pay, and their child will not get the job that was the expectation for taking on that debt.
Yeah, I mean, in a society where, such things are brought to a premium, I think back now to the farmers who were given these microloans and were unable to pay them back, and so committed suicide rather than face the disgrace of not having the substance to repay these loans.
Yeah.
You can only imagine that augmented to the college level, you know?
Well, I mean, it's probably going to happen in the U.S. It's happening in the U.S., right? There's lots of kids that have educations that they are still
Become
working
dilettantes and, yeah.
at 15 an
Yeah,
hour
yeah, yeah.
dollar jobs.
Right,
So
right.
that's happening in the U.S. as well. But right now, and that might change with India collecting more taxes and, becoming a more legitimate society, in that, people are contributing to it as opposed to trying to steal from it, which is what was
Yeah.
happening
Prior.
for so long, which is why, its progress has been halted for so, and
Now that
it's
the
now
society
it's rolling
has the
steam.
substance to give back to its own, perhaps things will get better.
And I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if they give and they see the results, they're more willing to give. I think years ago with the corruption, they were giving and they weren't seeing anything
Yeah, right.
except
At
someone
least
else
if you
getting
get a little
rich.
something back, yeah.
Now they're seeing the infrastructure, they're seeing cities being built. I mean, we stayed in Aero City in Delhi. That was like, you might as well have been in the United States.
Yeah, a corporate park like any other around the
It was a
globe.
corporate park. But it was more than a corporate park. When I was looking out the window at 1 o'clock in the morning, there were kids partying, teenagers and college
socializing.
kids socializing, dressed to the nines, partying at these bars. So it's attracting a young, hip audience to kind of that. So we'll see. I think it's moving in the right direction. And as much of not a fan of a lot of Modi's policies, I think one of the things he has done is help build the infrastructure and reimagine what India can be, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too. As much as I'm not a great fan of nationalism and the things that it breeds, I think that perhaps the common man is most concerned with, are there good roads and such.
Yeah.
And it sounds like our room service is here.